All right, so welcome everyone to our next webinar. This webinar is releasing Suricata 6.0 RC1 and how you can get involved with parentheses, even if you're not a coder. Today is the 29th of September, 2020. Well, let's see, I gotta get the right screen going here. So just a couple of announcements here before I turn things over to our presenter today, Victor Julien. A couple things about the webinar. We do have the webinar platform enabled, so you're only going to be able to communicate via chat and Q&A. If you have any questions, I ask please that you use the Q&A feature just so we can keep track of those questions a little bit better. I'll be managing that and jumping in to draw Victor's attention to those throughout the webinar, and then of course we'll have some time at the end as well. That's really about it for the platform. We're also recording this, and we will be posting this video, this webinar, later on our YouTube channel. So for anybody that isn't able to attend, we'll continue to get these out there as the future webinars will do the same. Few announcements then. Our Suricata community brainstorming event for November. Details will be coming soon, and we'll be posting those on Twitter as well as the forums that use discourse, so forums.suricata.io. With the postponement of Suricon, this is something that typically takes place there. We still want to get the community together. It is still a very important event to help set the roadmap for Suricata, and so this is something that again you can look for in November. We're offering an academic workshop on October 8th. I say academic in that we're trying to somewhat limit it to those of you that are teaching either in a university or a community college or a high school or even a cybersecurity type club. It's a free workshop. We're going to be getting started with Suricata. So we're going to be providing some initial content, a handful of labs, some slides, a VM that you can use to start teaching Suricata in the classroom. So it's really designed for someone who is either not real familiar with IDSs or of course not very familiar with Suricata. We have a workshop coming up at SharkFest 2020. If you hadn't heard, SharkFest has gone virtual. So it's the virtual SharkFest. I believe it has sold out, but it is certainly something to look into. Our workshop will be intrusion analysis and threat hunting with Suricata. That'll be on Friday, October 16th at 2:45. Well, actually, I think the times have changed just a little bit, but it'll be around 2:45 p.m. Central. OISF is the nonprofit that is responsible for really maintaining the organization and the development of Suricata. It has a variety of full-time, part-time, and contract developers. If you're interested in joining the consortium or otherwise getting involved with OISF and with Suricata, many ways to do that. One is to go to oisf.net, email us info@oisf.net, go to the forums, and just get engaged. As I already mentioned, Suricon has been moved. We are looking at dates in 2021. I think those have actually been announced already, but it will be in Boston. You can go to suricon.net for the latest information there. Our next webinar, so not too far from this one, on October 15th at 10 a.m. That October 15th date just seems to come up a lot here in those last few slides. I maybe didn't do a good job of scheduling all this. October 15th at 10 a.m., we have our next webinar with OPNSense. So we'll be discussing intrusion detection and Suricata with the team from OPNSense. So really excited and looking forward to that. If you have any ideas for webinar topics or becoming or wanting to present with one of our webinars, please feel free to reach out to me, Jay Stroshine at oisf.net. And finally, that's it for me. Victor is our presenter today. He is the founding member of OISF, the original creator and the current lead developer for Suricata, and currently leading the dev team. You can find him all over the internet at Inliniac on Twitter, his blog, blog.inliniac.net, on GitHub /Victor Julien, and also /Inliniac. So with that, Victor, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Josh. Let me see if I can share my screen. Are you able to see my screen now? Or are you just looking at me?
I can see your screen.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. So let's jump right into where we are with Suricata, the state of Suricata. Normally, this is a talk at Suricon. I now have condensed it to pretty much one slide in this presentation. So I think where Suricata currently is that we are a mature project. I think we are about 12.5 years old now. We have a really healthy community, a nice development pace, I think generally things are just going very well. Of course, we are impacted by the current pandemic. I'm here in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and so we're just getting a new round of lockdown kind of things right now. So it's impacting our personal lives, but not so much the working of the OISF, and the development team is going very strong, which is not really a surprise since we are a virtual team already. So things like Zoom meetings and everything is not really new to us. But still nice to realize this, as you know, things are kind of stressful in many parts of the world, so it's good that we are continuing to stay strong in the development. As Josh mentioned, Suricon has been postponed, which is a shame, of course, but was unavoidable. And trainings are moving online or have moved online. We hope to be able to do in-person trainings again as soon as possible, but when that is possible, that's remains to be seen. Suricata 6 development, so 6 is almost out, is I think minimally impacted by the pandemic. So overall, the delays are just all my fault. So let's talk about Suricata 6 because that's way more interesting. So the plan is next week, Thursday, will be the final for Suricata 6. It's our big new feature release, the result of about 1 year of development, and again has seen many community contributions. You can see the links to the announcements here, but I will go into what is actually new in the next couple of minutes. So I think the improvements we've done can be sort of grouped into a bunch of categories. So stability and robustness, performance, support for new protocols, improvements to existing protocols, improved extendability, including, or most importantly, adding plugins, and in general, just improvements to the detection capabilities. So when talking about stability and robustness, this is sort of a base requirement of really any program, but maybe even more so of a program that tries to secure other programs. So this is something that has been one of our focus points for a very long time now. We have a tracking ticket in our Redmine ticket tracker that's called Failing Better. And the goal of this is to make sure that we fail more gracefully if, for example, we run out of system resources, or if traffic is incomplete, or anything else unexpected that happens. So one of the major things that we have been doing for the last couple of years is start to move more decoding and parsing and such to Rust, because this has in general, leads to more robust code and also has more predictable failure modes. So this is one of the important steps that we're taking. Another one that's really new in this release cycle, so the release 6, is the fuzz testing, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. One of the major things that we've been testing in this release and improving in this release is, what happens when we get overwhelmed by the number of flows, or we hit the resource limits in the flow engine. And I think if you would start testing this, you would find it works much better and it handles it more gracefully. And in general, we are working hard to improve the handling of unbalanced traffic, capture artifacts, like, for example, seeing only one side of a connection, or seeing gaps, or hitting other kind of limitations. A bit about OSS-Fuzz, which is the fuzzing framework that we use. So one of our developments, Philippe Antoine, has been working on creating libfuzzer support for Suricata. And one of the attendees here, Circo, has been very helpful with this as well. So the idea with libfuzzer is that you create certain entry points into the code base, and then libfuzzer, and in this case, the OSS-Fuzz project can start hammering those entry points and start kind of finding input to your program that will lead to crashes, or if you use memory sanitizers, you will see subtle bugs and things like that. So we joined, and in the beginning of this year, we already have found lots of issues. Most of them are somewhat smaller, but some of them are more serious. And in the current stable releases, in the 4 and 5 branches, we've already fixed the first set of issues, and we'll continue to fix things in the future. So more issues are expected. Fuzzing is a very interesting approach. It's sort of a smart brute force approach, which means that you actually take lots and lots of CPU power to generate input. It's in a way not very elegant, I think, but it's still helpful for finding sort of impossible inputs and impossible states in our code. And one of the things that we've been doing is create many more checks inside the code that will abort on impossible conditions, and then the fuzzing framework will often find these conditions if we were wrong in our assumptions that they are impossible. So this is very useful to us. Another major thing that we've been doing is we've been improving performance, and a major focus area has been the EVE output. So EVE is the unified JSON output that we have, that we really focus on in our development, and that's just the default output that we use. And you know, just creating the JSON records, of which there could be thousands or even way more per second, caused a lot of overhead. So JSON-ish has been creating a different method that we use now, and it's called JSON Builder. It's simply a string builder. So it's not as advanced as what we were using before, but it's sufficient for our use case. And we've seen a very, very significant performance increase just in crafting of these records. And then Jeff from our project also has created a separate improvement, which is currently optional. So it's not enabled by default, but it's a threaded output, which means that every worker thread that outputs to the EVE log actually creates its own file. And this reduces threading contention issues, and so it can be lockless. And this, again, has improved performance a lot. It, of course, does require some changes on your processing pipeline, but most of the modern log processing tools can actually just handle those multiple files without problems. And then another thing that we've worked on is making the flow engine less expensive, and then especially the timing out, the aging out of flows, which was one of the most expensive parts of it. It may still be quite expensive, but at least it's less expensive now. So on the protocol side, we've added a number of new protocols. The thing that we worked on ourselves is HTTP2, which we still consider experimental at this point. one major thing to consider to realize is that HTTP2 in practice on the wire will be encrypted, and Suricata does not decrypt traffic, so it will require on some form of decryption that you do elsewhere. But when that decryption happens, we can just parse and log many of the fields in the protocol, and do also a limited set of detection currently focused on the actual HTTP2 specific things. The next step that we'll soon start working on is to actually overload the existing HTTP keywords such as HTTP URI and stuff to also work on HTTP2. Then we have contributed protocols. Sascha Steinbisch, I think he was supposed to join us today, so he has contributed the MQTT protocol. Has been a very large project. I think he probably underestimated how much work it was going to be, but it's done and done very well. And so on this side, we see that we can parse and log and also match on many components of this traffic. So that's a great contribution. Then another contribution, RFB, a remote frame buffer, if I'm not mistaken, which most people use as VNC, is a contribution by Frank Honza and I think also Sascha at DCSO. And again, this is includes parsing, logging, and all kinds of rule matches. So this is these are two great contributions. Then we already have a lot of protocols, but in our effort to make things more robust, we've started to rewrite certain things to from C to Rust. So the SSH app layer parser has been converted completely to Rust, and it has also gained two major features. So one of them is that it can actually log events now, like anomalies in the protocol. And then Fadim Malakhatsko, I'm sorry that I will probably mangle this, has contributed hash support, which is kind of the same thing as GA3, but then for SSH. So this is, again, a great community contribution. So staying in the community contribution realm, we can see that Suricata is now officially free of C code that does ASN1 parsing, which I'm very, very happy about, because this was causing no end of bugs and even some security vulnerabilities. So Pierre Chifflier has been doing the heavy lifting on the support in TLS. And then Emmanuel Thompson has been doing the raw ASN1 parsing that is part of our ASN1 rule keyword. So both of them are done in Rust now, and I'm very excited about this. Then in the team, Shivani has been working on rewriting DCE RPC in Rust. In the previous release, we had some DCE RPC in Rust already, but only the DCE RPC that ran on top of SMB. Now also the DCE RPC that runs just straight on the wire is running in Rust. And logging was added, and in general, it was just made a lot better and more robust. So that's great too. And then for all of the Rust protocols, Pierre Chifflier has been converting all of them to NOM5. The previous work was based on NOM4, which is just higher quality and higher performance. So that's another great contribution by Pierre. So some extendability. So until now, when you wanted to extend Suricata, you really had to just add code to the Suricata tree itself. And that's something that we're finally changing. It's been on our minds and on the roadmap for a very long time. And so what we are getting, or actually what we have right now in this 6 release candidate, is experimental support for dynamically loadable plugins. The support is currently somewhat limited. You can write your own capture method. You can write a part of the outputs. So you can, for example, would be able to say something like, I want the Redis output for Eve, and that Redis part would then be covered currently. We've successfully tested this with pfring, which is currently still part of our code base, but once the plugin support becomes stable, we would probably move pfring to a plugin, and other capture methods that are not really core Suricata components could also move to plugins. And in general, for Rust based parsers, we've improved the registration so that this is not completely plugins, but it's a step closer to needing no more C glue code and stuff. How am I doing with time? All right, some detection capabilities. I think other than all the detection keywords that were added as part of the new protocols and the hash support and stuff, we seen kind of more incremental changes. So adding more options to the byte test and jump and extract and such keywords. Some improvements to the transform support, flow bits, ORing support. So I think a nice set of incremental improvements overall. So near future on Suricata releases, 6.0 should be out next week. We'll also do a patch release for 5.04 and 4.19. We will do a new libHTTP with some fixes as well. And with Suricata 6, we'll also bundle the final version of the Suricata update 1.2 branch. Then when 6 is out, and we'll probably spend a little bit of time further stabilizing it and responding to feedback from the community and fixing some bugs. So we'll have a 6.01 release probably about a month later. But at the same time, we'll really start focusing on what the roadmap of the next major release will be. And I'll get more into how you can participate in that roadmap discussion later. So in general, how can you help this project if you want to? I think this is an interesting question, because I think in many cases with open source communities, people think like, okay, if I'm not a programmer, then there's nothing I can do. I know that this was my thought originally when years ago I looked at the Linux kernel community and was like, oh, this is awesome. I want to help, but I'm not a programmer, because at the time I was really not even a bash programmer. And so for me, it was the reason to start learning how to program. But I realized much later now that actually I could have helped in many other ways than just coding. So I'm going to kind of give an overview of things that we would find very helpful, even if you're not a programmer. And of course, if you're a programmer and you want to help, you're also very welcome to join. And you can see that others are doing it as well. So I thought it would probably be helpful if I would first define a little bit what I think the role is of the development team as it's which is part of OISF, which is it's their job and my job to work on Suricata. What our role is versus what a community role would be. And let me stress that this is not a strict separation, not a strict boundary. But overall, I think the team has the task to create the core of the engine, which ultimately should enable you as a community member to do the fun things like adding features. Ultimately, hopefully, you should not worry about what the internals are like, well, how the detection engine exactly works, or how many of the other things exactly works. You should just be able to focus on creating a new protocol parser or a new detection keyword or new additional output features. So in a way, our role is to enable contributors to contribute. And then another thing that you might wonder is, like, if I want to be a contributor, do I actually have any expectation of influencing the project, or is this going to be a project where there's like a fixed roadmap, and then you know, whatever I say is not going to be heard? And of course, the answer is no. You will potentially have a very big impact, and there are several examples from the past where I think the project's direction was really changed quite dramatically by contributions. So, you know, I've been talking a bit about eVlog already, and it may also almost sound like it's my own invention, but it's not. It's the invention of a contributor, Tom DeCanio, who about, well, is it 5 years or so ago, maybe a bit more, at a conference came to us and said, you know, I have this nice little thing called JSON output. Do you think it's interesting? And of course, this kind of was at the time where Elasticsearch was new, and Kibana and stuff were very exciting. And so we very quickly started to see the potential. And together with Tom, we started to create the first version of Eve, which has been, I guess, one of the pillars of Suricata pretty much ever since. But it's important to realize that this was actually a community contribution at first. Similarly, Rust. So when Pierre did his talk, I think it was in DC at Suricon, but I might be off 1 or 2 years, where he explained that he thought that Rust would actually be a very good language to use inside Suricata. It sounded very interesting to us, but to be honest, no one in the team could write even a single line of Rust, or at least, well, we could, as we've now shown, but we hadn't done it yet. And still, he made a compelling argument, did a lot of research, did a proof of concept, and later helped us a lot when we decided that we wanted to explore this. And right now, I think Rust is about 9%, according to GitHub, 9% of our code base, and pretty much, I would say, doubles in its share of the code base every release. So it was, Pierre mentioned later to me that he was very surprised that we actually took his proposal very seriously, but it shows that you can also completely change the programming language in our program from the community side. On a smaller scale, in general, rule language additions. So none of us are rule writers. So if in general, we need to hear from rule writers what we actually need to work on. So many of the rule writers, the rule keywords are influenced or directly requested by the rule writers in various communities. And then I wanted to throw it in. So the Lua support is quite old, but it was originally added as a funded development. So a company came to OISF and said, you know, we want to have this scripting support and we are willing to pay for it. And OISF then said, sure, as long as you accept that it will be completely open source and not proprietary, etc. And so they paid for the initial development of the Lua integration. And then, of course, the annual brainstorm, I will talk about this a bit more, at Suricon is a great way to influence the direction of the project. So just kind of to state the obvious maybe, but so the development team of Suricata consists of development people like coders and QA people and such. So we are not InfoSec professionals. We are not blue team members. And what that means is that we need other people to tell us what's important. Of course, there are lots of people telling us this, but we always need more people. So what do you need? What do you run into? If you are integrating Suricata into a product, you may have all kinds of conversations in the market. What does the market ask from you, and what things is Suricata missing or not doing very well, or etc. We need you to tell us how your network is changing. I mean, my network is, you know, a home network. It's not very representative of how your corporate network is and things. So in general, we just need you to tell us how you use Suricata. What you need to tell us everything, pretty much. We don't know anything. So if you want to help, your first question, or you at first might think like, I really don't know how to. And I think the very first step is just, why don't you start using Suricata? And then as a second step, maybe join our forum and kind of hang out there, read whatever other people are writing about. And if you run into any problem, you can report them at the forum, or you can maybe help others with the question if it's something that you've experienced as well. So just use it. I think this is already very, very valuable, because every environment is different. And if you use Suricata, you may find some kind of bug, or you might find it creates warnings, or it creates some kind of unexpected output, or maybe it crashes even. So by using it and then, of course, reporting issues you may have, you can already really help us a lot. And so I added an example just from, I think, last week, where the changes that we made to the Eve output, you know, someone had some tests that he always runs, and he noticed that it broke in the new Suricata 6. So he reported it in the forum, and I think a few days later we found the problem and fixed it, and that was very helpful, because, you know, our own test didn't catch it. So just use it and report your issues. So some people say, well, you know, I want to use it, but it's so hard to install Suricata. I don't know how to compile it. The list of instructions is too large, things like that. Well, no problem. Again, you can use Suricata from, you know, the Ubuntu PPA, which always contains the latest release, or you can use the versions that are in Fedora or CentOS, Apple, or just as part of your distribution. Of course, some of the distributions are a bit behind, and so we would kind of recommend you to use the versions that are up to date. But overall, it's a great way to get started in Suricata. But then, of course, if you find these instructions hard and the compilation steps hard, for example, this would also be an opportunity to learn, both for you and for us. So if you want to maybe try it anyway, and then report in the forum where you get stuck, which parts you don't understand of the documentation you don't understand, things like this, we can help you, and then we can help improve the documentation and the guides and stuff. So even if you're in this category, we would be very happy to get your help. So in general, I'm not a coder. Well, again, this is not a requirement. We have documentation that needs writing, and like every coder, we are always lagging a bit in the documentation side. So if you have documentation that you would like to add, or maybe you can review others' documentation, or just point out errors to us, many in the team are not native English speakers, and so we may have all kinds of problems with language and grammar and stuff. So helping write documentation, validate it, review it would already be super helpful. Help other users. In general, I think there are little things that are more rewarding than helping other people get unstuck in their problems. So if you are able to help someone else to progress, that's in general a great feeling and helps everyone. Help us understand what your use cases are. Many people just use Suricata as an IDS, like, you know, get some traffic from a switch and inspect it and look at the alerts. But there are many people who have different use cases that we hear about, and sometimes they're quite obscure, but it's always interesting to hear, and sometimes we can add more tests, for example, for the specific use case, so to make sure it's not breaking or anything. We're always interested in performance tests. So if you have any way to do repeatable tests, like for example, in a traffic replay setup, or you have some other way of testing, then we're always interested in hearing how the performance is, both between different Suricata versions, different settings of Suricata, but also compared to other tools to see, you know, if there's any outliers where we perform really bad. That's really what we are interested in, not where we perform well, but where we perform poorly. And, you know, there are a gazillion other things you might be able to do. If you don't have a lot of time, and, you know, we're all kind of busy, I don't think that's a problem, as long as you have the time to use Suricata, and you have you take the few minutes or maybe an hour or so it would take to report an issue in our bug tracker or in our forum. You're already helping the project, and I think many people are already doing this, but I would like to stress that this actually really helps us to make the program better. I'm not a coder, but I know something about CI, continuous integration. Well, first of all, you're hired, and you know, we have CI, and we have actually a kind of a mix of setups. We would like to extend this a lot more. I think we're even currently, I'm not sure if it's on the site currently, but we're looking for someone to join the team in this department. So if you have any interest in improving our GitHub CI or other CI type activities, then please help us. Would be very grateful. I don't know if anyone has seen Suricata Verify yet. It's on our GitHub. It's a Python tool with a bunch of tests. I think it's a couple of hundred tests by now, where most of the tests are structured with a pcap file, very small, a rule file, and a special YAML file that kind of specifies what the expected outcome is of the pcap plus rule file. And this is starting to become quite a significant collection of tests, which is really very, very useful for regression testing. But there's an additional benefit. I mentioned before that the OSS-Fuzz effort takes input, generates input to do the fuzz testing. So what it actually does for a large part is take the input from these Suricata Verify suite and use that as a seed, as it's called in this fuzz lingo, and it will use it as a starting point. So the more tests we add, the better the fuzzer can work. And so as long as the tests are somewhat unique from each other, of course. So if you have pcaps that you can share, or you want to use publicly available pcaps to create tests, that would be super helpful. An example on the CI front is that Roland Fischer quite recently did a contribution. He did a Clang format file, which is something that controls the code formatting in Suricata. And then he also created a GitHub CI integration so that when people do a pull request, the code that they contribute is checked for the formatting, that it's compliant to the formatting standard that we use, and it will flag it if it fails. And and he has also created a few util files and scripts to make it easy for you to actually use the proper coding style. So this is an example of a contribution that doesn't change the functionality of Suricata, but it's still very, very useful to the project and to the development process, both in the community as well as in the team. Some of you may be interested or using Suricata through third-party distributions like Security Onion or Selx or pfSense, OPNSense, etc. And would you still be able to help if you do this? And I think in general, the answer is yes. If you would support the projects themselves and report issues with their Suricata integration to the project. So it makes Suricata better as well. If you find issues in the integration in those projects, it might still uncover bugs in Suricata, etc. If you're more adventurous, you may say, well, okay, I know that currently, for example, OPNSense uses Suricata 5. What happens if I already drop in the release candidate of Suricata 6? Does it still work? Does it work as expected? Things like this would be very useful, and it would help not just us, but also in this case, for example, OPNSense, because they will be looking at the same thing, maybe not until a few months from now. But if you already found issues or if you already document certain upgrade gotchas, then it would be very helpful to the larger community. And in general, test any accuracy and performance testing that says something about either Suricata or the way it's being integrated is already very useful. And then, of course, there are related tools, like if you use log post-processing, rule updaters, things like this. If any of those, if you find issues in them, they might actually reflect problems in Suricata in some cases, or in other cases in the tools themselves. And if those are improved, I think the ecosystem of Suricata is improved, and that's also very beneficial to everyone. A very practical way to test Suricata itself is to just run all the pcaps you have. I think everyone who's working with network probably has some collection of locally recorded pcaps that they will never ever share with anyone. So, Suricata can just run entire directories of pcaps. With the Suricata 6, we also gained this pcap file recursive option where it can go down into your directory structure and read all the pcaps. And then we're looking for simple things like, crashes, extreme slowdowns, bad output like invalid JSON, unexpectedly high memory use or CPU use, strange errors and warnings and things like that. And if you then just report those issues, maybe if you're able to extract like a minimal pcap and maybe you can privately share it, or we can ask you to run certain tests to get more insight into what the problem is, then it would be super helpful. And then of course you can add things like address sanitizer. You can run with our debug validation, which adds lots more checks to the code. or maybe just run it on a beta version of your OS so that we find things that before the final releases, the final OS updates are out. All these things would be super helpful. Then if you have some access to something very expensive like an Ixia traffic replay setup, and you're able to generate some reports, especially comparing Suricata versions, we would be very interested. Also identify corner cases, like what happens if I do 10 million concurrent flows, or what happens if it's all UDP or all ICMP, things like that, I think would be very interesting to us. And if you're able to actually confirm correctness, is the output of Suricata what you expect? That would be even more useful. So what's in it for you? I guess we would be just very grateful. Isn't that reason enough? But more seriously, I think it's a great way to help your career, gain knowledge, build both professional and personal relationships. I think this community is very welcoming and very professional, and so it's a place where there's very little, or maybe not at all, unprofessional behavior. So it should be very safe to enter it. And of course, lots of companies are watching. So we've seen many people who contribute get nice jobs afterwards, including sometimes at OISF itself. Since I have about 10 minutes left, I think I can talk a bit about the next release. So 6 is almost out, which means we'll start working on 7. And of course, the question we're already getting from people is like, what will be part of 7? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on the roadmap, and it depends also on contributions. But I wanted to talk a bit about the roadmap here. So as Josh mentioned, Suricon, our annual conference, has been postponed due to COVID. And so hopefully it will happen kind of more or less normally in 2021, but that's too long into the future for the roadmap brainstorm session. So what we are going to do in November is a virtual version of our annual roadmap discussion. And we're still currently trying to iron out the details on how we will do this, how we will make it interactive, and so it will probably be a mix of some Zoom calls and some chat, but we'll announce it very, very soon. I think after the weekend is the plan. Contributions. The best way to determine what will become part of Suricata 7 is to contribute something that we can't resist. There are already some things in progress. The Ike V1 parser is in a very advanced stage of development in review currently. We have someone working on pcap recording for alerts. We know that someone is working on DPDK integration. So there's already things in the pipeline coming from the community that will very likely accept relatively soon after the Suricata 7 development branch opens. Some preliminary things that we as a team think. So these are not set in stone because we will still have the brainstorm session, and maybe that will change some priorities. So I'm going to share some ideas, and then after the brainstorm session, the virtual brainstorm will complete the roadmap. So some of the thoughts that we are having is that we should do more in the cloud. So we now have traffic mirroring options in at least in AWS and Azure, I think, as well, but probably in others as well. And we want to focus more on not just supporting that at all, but also to do it in a more optimal way and document it better and things like this. This is also very much something that we can use community help with. If you are using Suricata in a cloud setting, please help us describe how you deploy Suricata, and so for other users, it's easier to understand what the different deployment models are and such. Another one is improving TLS decryption solutions. So Suricata will not gain any decryption capabilities itself, but there are, of course, many other products out there and projects out there that can do this, both commercially and open source. And I think in some cases, it's also part of offerings like cloud solutions. So I think what we would want to do is make sure that we can work better. For example, just a few weeks ago, someone posted a pcap. I think it was a decrypted session from Azure, and it would be great to support such things better, because of course encryption is a major part of the network traffic these days for a very good reason, and so working with TLS support, decryption support is I think important. libsuricata is something that we've been talking about a lot. So libsuricata would be a library version of Suricata. Suricata would be the first consumer of it, but of course it would be, the goal would be that other programs can use the Suricata library to build Suricata functionality into other programs. And I think the typical example that we give would be something like a proxy server where the Suricata detection engine might be able to be used, and then the Suricata rules would be used, and you would be able to use Suricata that way. So this is, I mean, we've been talking about this forever, and we are getting more serious about it. We are also getting more requests for it. So one of the ideas for the next release cycle is to build a first experimental version of this. There are also many conversations currently ongoing around supporting DPDK and hardware acceleration in various ways. This is usually around the idea of smart NICs that are more powerful than regular network cards and offloading certain tasks to them. So this is something to kind of just reach more speed, which of course everyone always wants. On the plugin side, one of the plans is to just expand plugin support so that it can support a much wider range of plugins, stabilize APIs, improve documentation, create more examples, etc. So this is something that is very likely to happen, but I put it here as preliminary. So how do you contribute to the roadmap? In general, join this new virtual roadmap event that we're creating. Create feature tickets in our ticket tracker. Describe your use cases or ideas in our forum, or of course, just actually contribute the features yourself. And with that, I think I will either take questions or let Josh go first. I don't know what's the best way.
Oh, it's completely up to you. I think now is a great time for questions. So if anyone has anything, we're keeping our eyes on the chat, or if you want to put it in the QA. All right, Victor. So you got your first question from Jeff. You mentioned improved handling of unbalanced traffic. What kind of improvements?
In general, better support for if you see, for example, only one side of the traffic, in the past, some of the parsers would just keep piling up transactions, for example. I think we're still working on fixing a few of those things. Let's see, the detection engine has been improved to support this case better, and the logging engine and stuff. So I think it's mostly about corner cases where you would have extreme performance degradations that we fixed and improved.
You've got like the perfect balance of sun on your forehead and right below your eyes, and then something is like a natural pair of sunglasses for you.
Like this?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's just makeup.
Oh, is it? I did a webinar the other day, and I just completely spaced off the fact that the sun tends to move in the sky, and by the end of the webinar, it was so dark in my room you could barely see me.
Yeah,
other questions? I'm not seeing anything right now, so we'll just give it another minute or so, and then we'll wrap things up. So
I guess I don't know if there's an easy way for others to respond, but is there anyone who's watching and listening that is interested in joining the community as some kind of contributor and has questions on how to do this or what to work on, or maybe afraid to start contributing because you're fearful of getting rejected or flamed at or whatever? So in general, is anyone kind of on the fence currently?
all right, I got a couple more questions. Okay, so first one, is there any feedback on the Women of Suricata that was released during the summer? And I don't have any feedback on that. Kelly, our executive director, was on the call earlier, but she had to drop, so she would have been the best person to provide some answer there. I don't know, Victor, if you have any input on what they have planned next.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if Shivani is can be promoted to panelist to speak about this, but I would hate to put her on the spot.
Well, she can be promoted, and she is now promoted. So if she can, otherwise, I know that they are looking for, or maybe have found a space to join as a community, maybe some discussion around the forums. So definitely more information. I know they're still working and moving that effort forward. So we'll see. Shivani might can give us some feedback even in the chat if she could, if she has anything. Otherwise, the next question. We're using Suricata as an IDS with span input, switching to Cisco ACI and DNA with ER span input. Is this already as optimal coded or improvements planned?
So we did do some ER span improvements in this coming release. In general, I think we see that span ports have lots of issues where the port itself is overloaded and such. I think ER span support in Suricata is pretty optimal, other than maybe not producing giving you all the output of the ER span session itself. It can contain some more detail that probably we're just skipping right now. So if that's, for example, something you would need, then that is something that we can add. Yeah, I think this might also be a great question for the forum, to get feedback from others in the community who have similar setups, I personally only know ER span from looking at about 5 pcaps or something. So I would definitely not call myself an expert on it.
Okay, one update. So Shivani said that the Women of Suricata has had the one webinar, which we did back in July, and a few meetings so far. They are planning a new webinar pretty soon, hopefully around rule writing in Suricata, and they will make an announcement soon. So the forums, Twitter, other social media is the best place to stay plugged in there. Another question. Your work on libsuricata, do you think about changing the build system? For example, CMake. With CMake, it is more easy to deploy a library.
It's not really planned right now. We have been talking about it on and off. For example, because something like VS Code makes it a lot easier to integrate a project with CMake than Automake. This is maybe something where we would need a bit of help. Our build system has grown quite complex. One of the complexities is that we use the Rust integration, which creates its own library, which links against Suricata or the other way around. Anyway, it has some kind of circular dependency, which is complex to express in any build system. So would we consider it? Yes. Is it a trivial project? No, not at all. So we'll see. But if anyone is very excited and passionate about such things and want to help with that, then we would definitely be willing to talk.
Okay. And just one more follow-up on the Women of Suricata. Anyone that is interested in joining, please just reach out again, social media, Twitter probably the easiest, or any of the email addresses, contact information on suricataids.org and OISF.net. Okay, well, Victor, I don't see any other questions. Last call. Otherwise, we have reached the top of the hour. There it is.
Yeah. Last slide, I forget it. I always forget it.
So yeah, other than that, October 15th is our next webinar. We've already made the announcements on the forums and through Twitter. So registration is open. It's free, as all our webinars have been. We will be recording and posting that on YouTube as we are with this one. So the next webinar is October 15th at 11 a.m. Eastern or roundabouts there. It's all on the registration page. Don't rely on my faulty memory for that. Our academic workshop is coming up. That's October 8th. So that's free to, what we're hoping to see is get Suricata in the hands of more instructors and others that are teaching Suricata. So just helping them know where to get started and get them some initial material, some slides and a training VM and some very specifically chosen pcaps that make for good exercises. We'll be looking at bringing back the scholarship program poster session next year at Suricon. This year we'll have to postpone that as well. And then if you have any ideas of ways we can further engage in communities at large or specific projects, please feel free to reach out and let us know. That is also very helpful for us to continue to grow the support around Suricata.